So,
All right, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Appreciate the public participation. We always welcome that and are happy to see people here. We'll start off with Jerry Abbott, do our invocation, followed by Claude Jones will do our Pledge of Allegiance.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for all many blessings thou hast given us, and grateful for the opportunities we have to meet here as a community, and pray that we can be guided and directed on the best things for our community and for the environment that we create here. And we're so grateful for this country and for the freedoms that it gives us, and for the ability that we're able to have these meetings. And this we pray humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, let's get started with unscheduled public appearance. So the protocol is you have 3 minutes to come up and discuss anything you'd like to bring up. We asked if you're talking about the action about the PO zone later, you can bring it up now, but would recommend you do that during the public comment during that action. So we'll open up the public comment if anyone, or excuse me, unscheduled public appearance if anybody would like to bring something up. All right, seeing no one, we'll close the unscheduled public appearance. First thing on the agenda is open and public meetings action training. Rob Patterson,
That's me.
it's all yours.
Thank you, Vice Chair. As required by state law, all public bodies are supposed to have an annual training on the Public Meetings Act. So this is your Open Public Meetings Act training. I'll try to keep it short. Many of you have heard this many times before, but I've highlighted the most important things for you to keep in mind. The first bullet point there, the Open Public Meetings Act by state law has a policy statement, and this is the policy, that public bodies are required to take actions openly and conduct deliberations openly. So both the decision and the major points of how you get to that decision should be made in the public eye. Now, made publicly doesn't mean that necessarily the public always has the right to participate in it. Public meetings are for you to discuss things so the public is aware. A public hearing is separate from that. And often, because you all deal with land use stuff, most of the time the things you deal with as planning commissioners has a public hearing component with it. But outside of those realms, if it's just public meeting, you don't necessarily need to invite the public, but you always can. The other big point to remember is what constitutes a meeting that triggers all of the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act. And this is something that got changed very recently. To a lesser or greater extent, I don't know how much it actually changed. The state legislature likes tweaking language. I don't know what the effect of it really was. But the definition of a meeting is a gathering of a quorum of a public body. So a quorum is at least 4 voting members. So, or a majority of public members. For you, that's 4. And it's either in person or electronically. It has to be convened by the individual with authority to convene the body. So that would be the chair or the vice chair. are the only ones who can call the meeting. If the meeting is not called by them, it's not necessarily a meeting. And it's to do one of three things: receive public comment on a relevant matter, to deliberate a relevant matter, or to act on a relevant matter. Often we blend all three of those together, and that's why we hold those public meetings. Anytime you have a meeting, meaning you got at least 4 of you together, we recommend letting us know so we can post either a notice of quorum or something else. We are always required to have an agenda letting the public know that you are meeting and discussing the city's business. We'll sometimes do it as a matter of precaution if it's like Highland Fling and you all might show up to it, but it's not that big of a deal. The one thing I do highlight, meetings include workshops, like our general plan discussions that we're having. Those count as public meetings, but it does not include generally electronic messages. So emails shared between all of you are not a meeting. Just don't try to decide something beforehand. If you want to say, hey, I feel this is the right way to go about this, or here's my thoughts on it, perfectly great. We encourage that because you can get some thoughts going before the meeting, try to understand, or to ask questions to me or other staff of what does this mean? That's great. We just don't want, okay, commissioners, this item's coming up and we're all going to vote this way on it. That's what you cannot do and should not do. You want to do that decision and that discussion in the public. There's a lot of kind of detailed requirements. Most of these are handled by staff. Posting agendas, recording, doing minutes. Those are all required Public Meetings Act, but luckily staff handles that for you. So any questions on the Public Meetings Act and its requirements? I've also given you a little handout. That's my cheat sheet. So you're welcome to take that and read it when you need to go to sleep.
Hey, can we just clarify? So if I gathered 4 people together, it's not a meeting, but if the chair or the vice chair does it, it's a meeting?
Technically, under the new code, if it's not called by the chair or vice chair, it's not a meeting.
Oh,
We've not seen that tested yet in court. I'm sure someone is going to try that exact thing,
no, don't.
and someone else is going to get sued over it. I'd rather it not be us.
Okay. And then in our email communications, it's best if we use our city.
Use your city emails, because while that doesn't count as a meeting, it's still a government record. So if someone asked, hey, send me all emails related to this item that was on the agenda, we want to pull from it's easy for us because we can just pull from your city accounts. We don't have to say, hey, give us your personal email to find. Just try to keep it on the city side of stuff, so that's easy to find.
So question about cleaning up our emails. Do we not clean up our emails?
For
We
your
don't
city
delete?
emails, there's
Delete.
actually, we've set retention policies, how long emails are kept and then deleted.
Okay, so we don't
So
have to worry
just-
about that.
Don't worry about it. Just
Okay.
archive everything, put them in folders, and it'll delete itself when it's possible.
Thanks, Rob. That was a good explanation, and that was the big difference, was that the chair or vice chair could attend, but if they don't call. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Next thing on the list is the consent items for approval of February minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes for February 25th, 2025.
I second it.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Next thing is the ordinance on the PO zone action item. Rob, will you present that for us and help us explain exactly what's going on?
I'll do my best. Feel free to ask a lot of questions, interrupt me. I have a lot of background material, and I worry I gave too much, but I want to make sure everything's understood what's going on here. So as a reminder, the PO zone, 2 areas of the city, next to Highland Boulevard on the west side and a little bit on the east side, and then over by Lone Peak, there's a little dentist office out there. Those are our PO zones, professional office. So Patterson Homes has submitted a text amendment. They're looking to develop Site 3, but their text amendment affects the entire PO zone. So your job is to try to evaluate that and say, is this what we want for the PO zone as a whole or not? Last meeting, you made a recommendation to move forward with the text amendment more or less as proposed by Patterson Homes with a couple of changes. regarding the examples on that architectural design exhibit that we looked at, and then keeping the master site plan carried forward. The city council considered that. I put the wrong date in there. That was not March 25th because today is March 25th. At their first meeting in March, they considered the amendment and discussed a lot of the same concerns you did. A lot of focus was on building heights, the one-story, two-story requirement that was in the one-story requirement, especially in place for the home or the offices on the east side of Highland Boulevard, and whether those should be retained, what would the effect be overall on the zone. And they voted to send it back to the commission to essentially clarify your previous recommendation and to address what I understood as kind of three overarching questions. I'm going to get to those in a little bit, but I wanted to walk a little bit more of the background of the PO zone. So I want to make it clear, when I talk about the site plan, this is what I'm referring to. When the PO zone was adopted in 2003, there was this exhibit. It's Exhibit A, and it showed a certain number of buildings, their general locations, parking lots, all of that. This has been amended several times, and sometimes not as clearly as we would like. 2005, it's amended. The big change here is the storage area expanded. So you'll notice nothing there, it gets added. There was a proposed amendment in 2011 that showed this, which changed a lot of things. This gets rejected. There was an assisted living facility that was proposed to be on this site, which you may recognize, that's in the PO zone. It's the site just south of the church on Highland Boulevard. Now, if you notice, on the original site plan and later, that's that site that I showed in that other one. So that site is zoned PO but has never been master planned. It just sits there with the zoning, but it's not clear what's supposed to go on there. So in 2011, they had proposed an assisted living facility. So that shows that right there. This is rejected. The code was not amended to allow assisted living. This site plan is rejected entirely. So in the minutes, it says, no further direction was given. It was noted the ordinance stands as previously enacted. So that means that site south of the church still has no master site plan for it. It's zone PO, but we don't have anything for it. In 2018, this area gets allowed to be expanded for storage. And that shows up here. This is their new site plan, but they didn't amend that big site plan that showed all of it. They just gave us a little one for this property. And this is where we start having a little bit of breakdown of what the site plan requires. And then again, I just gave you the final version. 2019, we have the flex office buildings go in. 2021, the building C or building 7, that little one that's going up right now come in. But again, we just get site plans. We don't get something that changes the overall site plan. So I tried to consolidate all of them into one picture by just kind of overlaying them on top of each other. So you can see here, this site is the one south of the church, still zoned PO, still doesn't have anything with the master site plan. All of this is now storage units. And this has changed to what it currently is. The rest of this, it's kind of unclear. There's been a lot of discussion. This exemplifies we have a little bit of a problem with the zone because we keep changing it, but we don't have a master document says, and here's what it is. Now, all that said, what has been proposed by Patterson Homes is a way to solve some of these problems, but not necessarily the way that the city should solve them. This is a legislative decision, so it's entirely in your discretion. They are primarily concerned with this building right here, which has been marked as Building 3 on the site plan. So that's what they're trying to develop. And with that, so that was all in the map. And so PO Zone, Exhibit A was this big site plan, and it gets changed somewhat piecemeal over time. Exhibit B was just a landscape plan that went with it, so it kind of followed the same process. And then there's Exhibit C. This is the one that for all of the 7 buildings on the original, that site plan, the big plan, had very specific drawings and written details about what the building should be. And these are in addition to what the PO zone in the code already requires for architectural theming. So this is Building 3's requirements. You'll see one-story building, 3,400 square foot main floor, 3,000 square foot basement, material requirements, and there's the design. So the text amendment is to remove all of those exhibits that I just talked about. This is what they're proposing. Revises text for clarity. A lot of those seem like good changes from a staff perspective, but there are some things to highlight. We talked about like the screening and the HVAC thing before. We'll talk about building height in a second. And then it provides a new architectural design exhibit. This is their exhibit. You'll notice these two were changed per the commission's recommendation. So this is what they've presented to council and what got sent back to you. So if the council, the city decides to adopt what they've proposed, everything, all those exhibits I showed you goes away and we only have this and the code. I want to make it clear, so that means if they came in with one of the buildings shown on here, the city would have to approve it. If we don't want that, then the city needs to retain some of the code requirements or those kind of requirements in those exhibits and carry them forward still.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
And so this affects those other PO zones or just specific to
All
this?
of them. It will affect, well, depending on how we do it. We could do it so it's just this one site. Staff's preference would be have something that we can apply to other sites because I'm going to get at some point a development request for that property. And I want to know what I should be telling them they can and can't do there. So I would like, either through this amendment or if it's separate from Patterson's Homes and you tell staff to draft one, I would like to have something that I can point to that's good for the city and for the residents who live nearby as to what's going to go there. So their change would be for everything.
Can you clarify language for me? When we talk master plan, that's what's approved for that group you showed us. Master plan is not necessarily associated with an ownership of a parcel, but as a group or however they present it.
So
So
I want to make sure I'm clarifying language I'm using. I want to make sure, and I probably am slipping. I want to say master site plan refers to this, the one that's on the screen right now, in its various iterations. It is the where buildings and parking and access go. I think we've referred to master plan as the entire set of documents, exhibits A, B, and C, regulating the PO zone. So if I'll try to be careful and say master site plan is this, master plan is everything.
I think you can also just say, because it says it right at the bottom, this is a site plan. You don't have to say master. This is a site plan. There's a landscape plan. There's a building exhibit. All are part of a master plan.
And I'll say the reason why I don't call it that is because when we get to this is also a site plan, but it's for a site. Just planning-wise, we usually call it master site plan when it's multiple sites,
Okay.
and then a site is one specific building. So, but you're absolutely right. It is titled just site plan. So I should probably
but I
just call it
think
the site plan for the PO zone is this, and I'll say the master plan is all of it.
Yeah, so I think we can agree the master plan is all of those things.
Yes.
If we set the master plan aside, because we're going to have multiple master plans, and the PO zone will be its own zoning code, right?
So
like that other parcel you just showed,
Yes.
they'll create a master plan.
So what I understand what they're proposing is this would be a site plan for this specific one that would have to conform, well, it doesn't, but it should have conformed to this master site plan.
And that's what I'm trying to understand because especially after talking
So
with Patterson and seeing the different ones, they've given this original master plan and not really kept with any of it and developed each little part, petitioning for different things each time.
that's the problem is they sell off properties or they split it up between their various development groups and they all come in with a little bit different interests and they want to say, oh, we know you have this master plan for all of this. That's not what we want to build now. So can we tweak it for what we like? And that's why this has come back again and again and again.
But that master plan is what gives us the leverage to kind of control what we're getting.
Correct. When
versus
we have
just saying,
all of these
okay,
exhibits in there, that means if they want to change anything from it, they should go through a legislative process to
Right.
get that approval.
right.
So they want to build this site. What if they were to do it right now? I would have them submit a site plan that shows not just kind of a general drawing of the parking lot building, but very specific. Give me the grades, give me your widths, give me dimensions of everything. Show the building, the exact footprint. Show where utility lines are connecting into. And then for the building, give me renderings with dimensions, heights, exact material palettes. All of that would come in for approval as an administrative matter. And if it didn't match this concept, if they said, oh, we want to put an access, here, and we want to build a big building that's actually more like this, I'd say, your master site plan doesn't show that at all. You got to conform to it. So
So then they would have to come in here.
come here,
Where the
legislatively change
Public
it.
could have some input. It's legislative.
Yes,
And they can negotiate if it goes to a two-story and what that looks like, and they have leverage.
correct. So if you like keeping this restricted, you can keep the master plan as it currently is in the PO zone. How that will affect, how we make sure that we still cover that other area that's really not covered by this master plan, the one that's right here, we can figure out language for that. But right now we have some direction. I would like to have more direction.
Well, in the revision, in the first paragraph, it says that for these newer areas that are outside of this master plan, existing master plan, the developer would need to submit.
A master plan.
Right, so I think
Yes.
that's,
Yeah, that's why
And then-
I liked that language from their amendment, because it does give me more things to require from them. So we have more processes and requirements that they have to go through.
and I think the problem with the first master plan was the time. Like when this new master plan comes in, it'll probably turn right around and get built. We're all
Yes.
gonna agree on stuff. It's gonna get, what happened here, this was done back in 2003.
2003.
And then everything changed. So I don't think this is going to be a problem going forward in the PO zone because the future PO zones are a lot smaller.
Yes.
And the other reason I'd like us to focus on the PO zone is this could be something in our general plan as we start to identify, how they have all these places for future commercial. Well, instead of commercial, we could put professional buildings, so that it looks more residential and it doesn't make it look like it's a big cell. I'm not saying we do that. It just is another tool
Opportunity.
that when we get into our discussions and we could say, hey, instead of commercial retail, why don't we put these, professional offices here instead or something like that. And I think once we solve this, it's not going to be what that's why I would like to just take this master plan, because it was agreed on, even though it's old, decouple it, or if you want to just keep it all together and rewrite the code, I don't care. But it stays in place. And Patterson told Audrey and I, it wasn't our intent to delete that, the way it was written.
Right.
So
there's-
I appreciate the clarification there. My original question was simply that lower area that you showed, is it an amendment to a master plan to get that in, or will it be its own master plan? That wasn't clear completely in what I heard.
For this area,
Yeah, for that area, would it be an amendment to that master plan or an independent master plan?
the way, under the proposed language, they would submit a new master plan
Okay.
for approval. And then once that gets approved, they then come in for a site plan that is here's how we actually
Details.
build the thing.
Okay.
So they wouldn't really be amending this unless that's how the commission wants to go, which is, for all these areas, we want you to add to the master plan of the PO zone your specific master plan as a legislative matter. And there's ways we could do that.
But if this was on the whole other side of town, are we thinking that just because it's adjacent to it? Or are you saying the master plan could be a bunch of different parcels?
It could be a bunch of different parcels. It's legislative. We can
It's
do
just however it's presented.
however we want to write it.
Well, and that's what, last time when I made that motion, it was to keep the existing master plan, and all later things would have to come through.
Okay.
And that's kind of where I'm trying to make sure I understand the clarification. If we leave the master plan, it stands independent of any other master plan that is presented afterwards. Yeah, in any PO zone. And as Jerry was bringing up, that's my concern as we go through the master plan over the whole city, that we may introduce some more areas. It's not just, there's a potential of more than what's there. So thank you for that. Do you have anything else, Rob, you were going to share?
Up to you how much you want to go over. There's that. You could, we have the Exhibit C that has like specific architectural guidance. We could keep that. We could also replace it with something else. I know Commissioner Abbott kind of has a suggestion. That's also a great option. This is the thing I just wanted to highlight. These were the kind of, as I distilled it, the 3 council questions, which is, what do you want to do with that 1-story building requirement on the east side of Highland Boulevard? Did you care for building height, size, whether they're based on roof type? Does roof type affect building height? Meaning, should you care if it's pitched roof versus a flat roof, what the building height is? And the final one, how to measure building height. And these are things we can continue. I don't know if you want to pause here and talk through each of these separately.
Can I add one to that, though? Because City Councilman Scott, his concern was that what we have in the PO zone needs to make things look residential, because he pointed at the building and said, that doesn't look residential. Please do something that would prevent that, which to me, instead of pictures, was let's write something up like massing and requirements.
Right, which is what this slide was talking about. Like, you could add that architectural guidance into it. Though, I mean, I put this on here. If we're going to actually write up descriptions, it may just be easier just to stick that into the code itself.
Right.
Rather, because we already have like roofs, here's permitted and prohibited roof types. If we have like massing requirements for variation roofs, let's just put that in the code rather than a separate exhibit that we have to go and find, because that'd be easier for staff to find. So if we want to write things like that, great. Let's just put it in the code.
And I think the more specific we get, because in my experience, because I draw plans too, I'm mostly dealing with HOAs that have specific massing, no wall longer than 20 feet without a 2-foot break. Never do I see pictures like look like this. It's more massing requirements, like 60, like in the one that I sent you guys, like 65% can be a 2-story, 35%. That is a lot better direction than here's 6 pictures. And that's why I narrowed it down to 2 pictures. Is I think there are some of those pictures that definitely don't look residential, and we should just take them out, like really narrow it down. I wrote this. Usually the way it works is we should have a consultant write it. The consultant comes in, and just like we did the general plan, and we say, look, we want this to look residential. It's a commercial. These are the uses. Will you write up some very clear direction for anybody that comes in so that we're not kind of guessing? That's how that one building went through. Everybody was just concerned about the landscape. Nobody talked about the building, right? But it would have never gotten there if there were specific guidelines that Rob would have been able to say, no, this doesn't meet the requirement, and keep sending it back until it does, close. And so, and I'm not saying we have to hire a consultant, but in no case should we have the developer who's going to be using the PO zone probably the most write those.
So just to, staff has not spent much time. I spent a lot of time now researching the background because there's a lot to research, but I have not spent a lot of time rewriting this code because the city allows anyone who owns property to submit a text amendment to change the zoning regulations for their property. So Patterson Homes, like any resident in Highland, can submit a text amendment asking for the city to change something about how their property is regulated, and that's what they've done. So this is not, staff has not pushed this. This is a request from a property owner to change zoning. So I have not, gone out and tried to write a bunch of stuff for it because it's really their amendment. It's not staff's amendment. Now, if this is something where you want to revisit it, we absolutely can do some of that. And I've worked with consultants before on rewriting zoning ordinances. Sometimes if it's simple enough, I can write it. If it's more architectural, I might have an architect that actually is a little more experienced with that, do that. But I have done that kind of thing before in other cities.
Yeah.
But where this is a text amendment from an applicant, not a resident, but a property owner, it's more of, I suggested some things they might want to think about, but it's their code change that they want to present.
That's super helpful hearing that perspective, because that's not at all what I was under the impression of, so thank you.
Sorry for not making that clear. So this is in no way a staff-driven item. This is entirely Patterson Homes is asking for this. We are just presenting it to facilitate their application.
And I just wanted to add, after talking with Patterson, when Jerry and I went, they're not on this high-speed timetable trying to push anything through. They've backed off. They're not sure what they want to do. And so we have time to we should take time to be careful about what we're saying here.
Well, and the only reason I kind of took a step out of there
Yeah.
was they weren't just asking to change something for them. They were changing our entire, it was affecting other properties. And I think it's important that, like what you said, if we're going to have a PO zone, let's write something for a PO zone, not for a site. We zoned it and then included that site in it. Maybe the intent was this will never be used ever again, but now there seems to be a use for it.
Yes.
And it could be a future use if in the general plan we decide to maybe expand the PO zone a little bit and not just commercial everywhere, you know.
So my recommendation is I like that I can apply this to more properties zoned PO. But I'm not saying this is the way necessarily I would have written it, or this is the right way of doing that, or this is the right architectural. That's not really my call. I don't say like, yep, this looks residential. This is the right for PO zone. That's for you to make the call.
Okay.
I like the concept of, I'd like being able to apply this in other areas that are zoned PO. But what that really means, we can hash that out. And I'm not trying to push any particular way of resolving this. The one thing I do want to touch on with building heights, this is something, the current PO zone kind of talks about average. It says on sloped lots, it talks about this whole 35 feet, and it says on sloped lots where the grade difference exceeds 4 feet in elevation from the average maximum height of building as defined in this other code section, you don't exceed 35 feet. I don't know what that means because the code section it's pointing to is the general definition of height of building, which has nothing to do with averaging. So they had proposed just making this consistent with the general definition, which I'm good with, but that's also not what we have to do. We have, a lot of our commercial zones have different height regulations. Some are measured from top of curb, like Ridgeview is all measured from curb height. Some are measured from finished grade. Most of our buildings are measured from finished grade. I think one is measured from natural grade, perhaps?
What's the difference between finished grade and curb?
Great. Great question. So finished grade is whatever they end up putting the grade at. So once they do a site, they usually dig out some things. They might raise the ground or lower it. Whatever they finish that out, that becomes finished grade for their site. Curb is fixed because it's no matter whether you raise or lower the property, the street next to it will always be at a certain height. And so you say you measure from that point up.
And typically, finished grade on a piece of property, you want the water to run away from the property, so it's typically higher
Yep.
inches.
You usually slope it to different ways so you don't
Yeah.
have water running to the building. That's what you don't want.
You can still slope it if you do curb.
Yes, you can.
Absolutely.
It's just, sometimes they like being able to raise it because when you excavate footings, there's a lot of dirt that has to go somewhere. So if you raise your entire site by a foot, that makes it easy to put that dirt there rather than finding a site somewhere to dump a bunch of fill dirt.
So I'm trying to understand the average thing. Is that for like a walkout basement? If this is sidewalk and this is the bottom, so it starts here, goes here, there's a walkout. Is it saying you go down 4 feet and that's the max, and then that half of that comes off the top of the building?
I don't really know what this is saying in terms of average because it's not written in a way that it makes sense.
So we need to write it because the guy enforcing it should know.
Yeah, it'd be nice. So the current definition, I know how to enforce, which is finished grade. You measure to basically wherever your finished grade is. So after you finish your lot, your foundation or the bottom of your first floor can't be more than 2 feet above that, and then it's 35 feet up. That's how we do every home in Highland. So if you have a sloped lot, people just build a walkout basement. We're not measuring off the back of it, which would be 45, 50 feet. We measure from essentially the highest point near their foundation. We say, okay, floor can't be more than 2 feet off of that, and then 35 feet from that. So that's how we do it for all residential homes in Highland, except for Ridgeview, which is a little bit different. And we can do that here, or we could say, measure it off of back of curb. Average is hard because I don't know how to measure average over a lot. We could ask them to give us a topographical survey that shows your topography over your site, and we'll measure it from some point in there up 35 feet.
But then they mass grade the whole site.
But they mass grade the whole thing. So I'd rather, if I'm making a recommendation, I'd say either keep the general definition, which is finished grade, 2 feet and then 35, or from curb. Because those are two things that are very easy for us to enforce and apply.
But when you say curb, you mean like the parking lot curb? Because there's no street going through some of these.
The street that it fronts on.
So
Highland Boulevard.
Highland Boulevard.
So you measure 35 feet from back of curb on Highland Boulevard.
So if their lot is going like this,
That reduces it. Or they have to level their site and shift things around to... It's not an easy question. Building heights are very difficult.
When it's not a house, because you just go by the nearest road.
Yeah.
But where the Highland Boulevard is so far back.
Yes.
Well, in my email, I think I just put in there what I thought could be a way to do that. But should we have a public hearing before we get into details?
Jerry, I was just going to bring up, does anybody else have any other questions for Rob before I open up public comment? We can, of course, ask more questions afterwards. Okay. So we're going to open up public comment for discussion on the PO zone. Please come forward, give your name, where you live, and you've got 3 minutes to give your thoughts.
I'm Liz Rice, and I live at 6241 West, 9680 North in Highland. I always feel like I'm preaching to the choir when I come up here, and you probably already know this, but when I sat on the Planning Commission in 2010, 2011, I want you to kind of understand what I was thinking when we put Patterson Homes in, along that street. And I have great regard for Patterson Homes. They built my home in American Fork. It allowed me to make enough money that I could sell it and buy a lovely home in Highland, and it was a nice home in American Fork. I have a couple of concerns, and I'm trying to hurry, so please don't think I'm being too random. My concern is that they're going to tear down A and B and make it really high. We all know, and it's a proven fact, that when you put homes near high-rise commercial-type buildings, your property values go down. And I'm all about property values. I love the buildings that are there now. Let me just say that. Because it looks like the homes. And I don't think they're too high. I'm kind of bad at measuring feet. 35 feet, and keep in mind, like you guys have discussed, that finished grade can actually raise it 2 to 3 feet if you don't take it from the curb, right? And I know Rob will correct me if I'm wrong, but so I just want to, make that decision or make that comment as you make your decision. And also, I don't know if Rob can put up those homes, those buildings again, but I thought you guys had ruled out like the one in the right-hand corner. I thought that was a no, this one right here. I thought that was a definite no. That one is Lehigh. The middle one is Lehigh. And I just would encourage you to make it look as much like homes as you possibly can. I am concerned they're going to tear those down and make it all look super commercial. I want you to know I talked to a couple. I have a dentist and a dermatologist, and both of them operate out of home-looking offices. And I asked him, I said, why do you like the home-looking offices and not the high-rise, cold-looking buildings? And he said, we actually do better business in a home-looking environment. He said, it just makes people feel more comfortable. If you look at the commercial property behind Alpine Credit Union in American Fork, it's the same concept. 35 feet is quite high in my opinion. But and there was one other thing that I wanted to just hold on. Sorry. That's it. I'm just really concerned that we're going to look really, really commercial. And I know that there's residents who are concerned about view, and they were concerned about view in 2010 and 2011. That wasn't my thing. My thing was we need to keep it looking residential and keep the property values high. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll try to talk faster. Okay, so building 3,
Tracy, can you
Yes.
tell us who you are?
I am Tracy Barnes, and I live just in this area, so I'm looking at all of these things. And building number 3 is specifically what I would be looking at. When I bought my house, I talked to the people in Bull River. They assured me it would be a 1-story, just as it had been planned, and that it would look like a home. And so I thought, okay, that's great. Now, so I'm encouraging you to keep that. This has been agreed upon by that whole neighborhood back in 2003, again in 2011, and it just seems like it keeps getting changed, and people are buying and building homes according to what's on the plan, and then things get changed. And I know my neighbor, Alex Bean, couldn't be here this evening. He's going to look smack at building 3, just right through his front window. So he's very unhappy about that. He'd actually like to have the parking lot and the building swapped so that it moves a little bit further down. But everybody wants it 1-story and looking like a home like was on the plan. Now, if you go to these other buildings, buildings 4 and 6, that's on a pretty steep hill. So I know that in the plans, one of you, I can't remember, replied to Manuel Bueno that Patterson wanted it to be from the high point, 35 feet up from the high point. Well, if you build your thing on a slope so that the building's on like this, you can just pick whatever the highest point is, and it's way the heck up there. And that blocks everybody's view. So, I mean, personally, I would like them to say 35 from the street. That may not be reasonable. You'll have to decide that. But I think it needs to come down at least an average like it is now. Even though it's not clear, please make it more clear, or come to street level. And can we talk about landscaping, or is that going to be another discussion? Because Patterson has not done it. Their islands in the middle of the street are non-existent. Either they put the concrete around and walked away, they didn't landscape it. Where Normandy is, that whole street area there of the French country neighborhood, he put all that in. There's no, it's just dirt. It's not landscaped at all. You go up the street, all the other developers are required to do that, and he is not. I know he has a bond on this building number 7 right now that the city won't release until he gets these islands landscaped, but it's not clear if he has to put in all the way where it's just dirt, or he has to stick a couple of trees in it. I'd like to have that defined, and I'd like to hold his feet to the fire because he has not done that in the past. Thank you.
I'm her other half, David Barnes. We live just west of the new buildings, the 2 commercial buildings that they've built right there. And again, we bought the place thinking that these were going to be one-story buildings. And I don't know how that went from a small 1-story, 3,400 square foot building to 2 much larger commercial buildings. You may have had something to do with that, but we were under the impression that we bought our house before they broke ground, and then they built these 2 buildings. And my concern, like my wife's, directly from our patio looking at the sunset, if they don't do grade at street level, that 35-foot height could put those buildings way high and block, I mean, again, you don't care about our cost, our value of our home, but it would affect a lot, the value of our home. And just for congruency's sake, having 2 very home-style buildings along the east side of the road and then a very distinct commercial square blocky building, I think would look very strange for that. So we would strongly encourage a street level, curb grade, take the 35 feet from that, and then maintain somewhat of a home look. And appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Manuel Bueno. I live just on the east side of this area. And one of the first things I just wanted to ask really quickly of Rob is, in one of the first plats that was done in 2003, there was some open space there, has that been built on by the other storage units? Okay. So mainly my concern is the same as the residents, where Patterson, originally had agreed to a certain development, and then now they want to change it. So some of the main things, like these residents have mentioned, is the one-story building, building 3 on the east side. That should remain a one-story building. On the other side, there's the 2-story buildings, and I believe there's only one left to be built there. I think one was moved. Do you know, Rob? There used to be 2 buildings that were south, and that should be clarified as well. That was south of the storage unit, but I believe when they built the office warehouse building, this is what I call it, that one of those buildings was moved over to the office warehouse, because there's actually 2 buildings there. So I would want you to clarify, in that original plat, there's definitely the building 3 on the east side, 1 story, and is there only one left to be built south of the storage units? And then it's always been the same issues. The architecture, again, the original intent, and everybody knows this, including Patterson, is that those buildings were to be residential in nature, and that's always been the fight, especially when they built the warehouse building. They first proposed just a big block, building that was not residential in nature. We got it to be, a lot better, but, is there language that makes it, for those 2 buildings that are still to be built, residential in nature? And then the height, I would recommend going from the curb. When they built the most recent buildings there that are completed, the warehouse building, there was slope and grade going up, and they were required to build, more with the street. So they actually moved quite a bit of the dirt was there into the lot that's empty right now between the church and that building. So that lot that's to be built, I would prefer, from curb. That would require, like Rob said, a lot of moving dirt and so forth. But the last thing, as I kind of run out of time, though, is really the only PO zone that's available to be developed is that amount of land between the church and the office warehouse. So I would just encourage us to be able to still have, I don't know what you call it, if it's legislature, but having a public input and hearing, so that when they do either come in and file a general plan for that or master plan, that we can have the same process and have public input, so that we kind of hold everyone's feet to the fire for what's been agreed to. Thank you so much for your service.
Hi, I'm Jan Eyring, and I'm at 6727 West Spring Hollow Lane in the Dry Creek neighborhood, which is just above Country French, where some of these concerns are being mentioned. I was involved a few years ago, I think it was 2019, in coming here with a lot more of our neighborhood than is here tonight, complaining about those initial plans that Patterson had shown us that didn't have this rural residential feel with good landscaping and kind of traditional architecture. If you've been in our neighborhoods there really aren't modern homes. They're all traditional. I couldn't believe that green square building that's come up. What is this? We spent, I think, 5 or 6 meetings here testifying. Patterson was here explaining what, kind of negotiating. He'd show a plan and it was not right. and the neighborhood, so I think all of us here, we know what the neighborhood likes because a lot of us were here before, and we hope that you'll go back to that, those original architectural plans. I lived in Moraga, California, and that's a very strict zoning. It's remained the same for, like 100 years, and it's because the
people cared and they spoke up when some of these plans that were going to disrupt the kind of the look and feel that we wanted when we bought our homes. So I don't want to take too much time because it's already been said, but it sounds like the grading at the curb or street level is preferred. And that, I don't know what can be done about that big green. It's going to be covered, I'm sure, but that building that's 2 stories is just an eyesore, and it sticks out and it doesn't fit in. And I think, this master plan that you're talking about on both sides of the street, it should look the same. All of those buildings that are built. And I'm surprised more of our neighbors aren't here, but I know because they've spoken before on the same issue that they'd agree with what's been said today. So thanks for your listening.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Vice Chair, Commissioners. My name is Doug Courtney, and I'm a resident of Highland. I'm speaking to you this evening as a member of the City Council, and just wanted to thank you for the time and the effort to revisit this issue. I know my colleagues on the Council very much appreciate the work that the Planning Commission does, the time and the conclusions that you come to, which is why we had a few questions that we wanted to make sure we got clarification on the Planning Commission's thoughts about them. So thank you very much for your service in general, and particularly for spending the time and effort to revisit this a second time. I and the rest of the City Council very much appreciates it. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. We'll close the public comment period and open it back up to the commissioners for questions or discussions or motion.
Perhaps I can ask, I know there's been, Commissioner Abbott prepared some documents for you to consider. Is there more information you need from staff to make a recommendation on this? Do you need more time to consider it? How can we help you make a decision on this?
I was just going to, I think that part of it is we need to decide, are we going to address a code that would qualify for all PO zones, that we want to have unified language that would represent that while addressing specifically this building 3 and whatever may future go into this Patterson development. When are we available to work on code?
I mean, you can do it tonight. One option, you have a few options. You can workshop it tonight. We can continue it for another meeting to discuss and hash out further, and you can even, meet under 4 of you at a time to discuss ideas. And then send me questions or say, hey, Rob, could you draft some language like this? So you can work through that process tonight at another meeting. We can even hold a workshop if you'd like on this. Another option would be to recommend denial of their text amendment as applied for, with a recommendation saying, we like a lot of the idea of cleaning this up, but we want it to be city-led rather than applicant-led. That's also a recommendation you can do. And then you can give us direction on how staff should go about doing that, and then see if the council agrees with that or not. So you have it's kind of up to you how you want to proceed. Do you want to discuss kind of the different points the council asked you to discuss? Do you want to consider the information I presented and maybe Commissioner Abbott's presented and come back at another meeting? Or do you want to make a recommendation tonight for or against?
But to be clear, if we deny it, it still goes to council next.
Yeah, you recommend denial, the council makes a final decision.
Yeah. So in talking to council and the developer, they're fine to, if we have an open discussion now, which I would like to have, just because like I presented some stuff. I haven't presented any of this to Patterson, like the architectural stuff. I kind of just told them what I was thinking about the different roof heights, because I didn't want to present anything to him that you guys haven't had input on, looked at, because I think if we can come together with the neighborhood and the developer and present something more to the city, the city council can better look at that. But what I really like, what Rob said earlier, is I think we can have discussions on, the master plan. Do we decouple it? Which, we can do. I do think we should rewrite the code to be a standalone code for all PO, but I would like staff to be involved in that. Like Robin mentioned, he didn't really, he could get into it and make it more of a staff-led. So I don't know if we can, if we deny it, it moves on to council. But if we continue it, we can say, hey, let's take a run at writing this up where you could look at the comments that we, based on the direction we give you here in our discussion. And then next meeting, or prior to next meeting, those drafts can come out to us so we can look at those, amend them, and then know that, it's more city-led, but also give the developer a chance to see the direction that we're going and say, yeah, you know what, that makes sense. Like if he really likes what was presented, or he might have a couple tweaks, we don't have to accept them, but at least he's had some say. I mean, he's the property owner. But I do feel, and I think this is a unique situation, that the master plan stays in place. And the only reason we're having problems with the master plan is it was written in 2003. We went through a down market that crashed everything, and now everybody's reinventing themselves. I don't think that's going to happen on future PO zones. I don't think the next PO zone is going to go through a master plan. I think they're going to turn right around and master plan it, site plan it, build it. And I think it'll be smoother, and they're not going to be as massive as this was. It'll be these smaller chunks.
We do need to look at it, like was mentioned, and we talked about Patterson too, about this. If they were to tear down some of their buildings and redo it, it's still going to satisfy the look and feel, height,
Right.
and all that stuff. So that's set in place, and that's a framework. If they want to do whatever they want on their property, that's fine, but it will still meet that for future.
So what's good about that is if we hold to the master plan, those buildings are designated as single-level homes.
Even the two-story, really nice
Both
looking
the-
residential
No,
ones.
both the ones that are built were supposed to be single-level. For whatever reason, I mean, they look great. The one that's a two-story looks like a single level, and actually those guidelines describe that architecture. If they were to ever tear it down, they could only come back as a one-story. So they're kind of motivated to keep those where they're at because they were approved and they were built. The biggest complaint I heard from Patterson about the existing two-story, because remember how they came in, they say they don't really function, is because there's not an elevator in it. There wasn't a requirement to put elevators in those. So the people that work downstairs have to go downstairs. Well, if you build, and so that downstairs real estate is not very valuable, is what they were saying. And so if they build the building 3 as a one-story and are able to put a elevator in it, that downstairs space is more usable because and they're going to have more privacy from the road. They're going to be looking at a nice wash, this landscape. So, there are ways to keep that a single story. Or if the neighbors here are talking to them and say, look, if you do kind of a morph of it, or if you move the building, is one of the comments that were made, although Patterson said they didn't think they could move.
Yeah, I was going to say, because of the
parking lot.
landscape, there is no way they can switch the parking lot for the building because of the grade. It's just.
And they had other
dramatic.
ideas. If we allowed these, they're called man caves. They do them in Scottsdale, where it's all one story, and it's where guys and gals can have a garage, an office, a place to hang out outside of the home, and that's all one level. It's a low use type of a thing. They have other ideas that they've been thinking about that they could present. But for me, I just think that Rob has a lot of information and more that you guys can also mention. He can take what I've given him and have an architect look at it, or he could look at it, and then send us a draft, and then I think we can look through that draft. Because I didn't really read all the other stuff. It's just that it wasn't touched, so I didn't touch it. Kind of, they were just kind of picking little things, which when you looked at it, it looks like they were just decoupling their master plan. And so, for me, the motion I would lean towards after we have more discussion to give Rob direction would be to continue it, but have Rob rewrite it as a standalone code and lean towards just making the master plan and its exhibit. Master plan meaning everything, buildings, landscape, whatever, standalone. And then they can come in and if they want to go a two-story, they can come in and that's their right. But then the public can then come in and say, well, we want this, and they'll be more apt to meet with them.
Were you saying something? So I was just wondering if you are, how the commissioners feel about other PO zones being limited to one story. Because I don't think that's necessary. Or
That's why I want the city to lead this so that we can catch those things before.
But I will say, we're not going to say it's not. Like, if they came in with a site plan and said, hey, this building backs these homes, and so we're going to present that this is a one-story, and then these will be two-story or mixed. The code, I mean, they can build a one-story. We don't have to require it, though. I don't think it'll be a required thing. But in the architectural guidelines that are written, and in the ones I didn't change, it talks about taking into consideration the surrounding, like what's around it. Like those two buildings that were built, they would have not passed that squareness if they backed a neighborhood. The back side of those, they would have had to have been elevated like these other buildings because people in homes are looking at them. That's why those were kind of allowed to go that route. The two that are right next to each other that kind of look residential, but then the back sides of them look just like a Walmart building. But that's because the storage units are looking at those. Had that building been presented where there was a neighborhood behind there, they would have had to have done architecture. Like the two buildings that were built, if you go on McClellan's side, who lives right behind them, it's architecture. There's gables, and it's not just square. It still has a residential look on all sides because there was residential behind it. And that's what these guidelines can direct them.
I think, I'm just following what you're saying, Jerry, is I like the option that we take the work that you've already done, hand it to the city, get some more recommendations. We haven't really talked a whole lot about the height. And for me, I really like 35 feet is 35 feet. To your point, if it's...
To what?
Yeah, but 35 feet is 35 feet. That's what everybody is already being held to. I suggest we use the standard that already exists, that all of the other houses are being used against, or measured against. So that's what I would like to see. If it's good enough for a residential neighborhood, it should be good enough for a residential PO zone.
Can I ask one question about that? The two homes that are there existing, are those curb or are those?
I would have to pull up their site plan.
Okay.
I would guess they were not measured from curb because nothing in the PO zone requires it.
Because
But they may look like it
Yeah,
just
it does.
because the lot might have been flatter to
the lot
begin with,
sloped
and it
down.
slopes down. I mean, filling a slope is very expensive, so most of the time they're going to want to just cut out what they can. Moving earth is expensive, so
What is the commercial requirement?
it varies by zone. Some are just like all the residential zones where it says from finished grade.
So like if you go to our sort of town center, where there's a building in the middle of the parking lot, how did they measure the height from that?
So
Did they go to SR 92?
C1 zone, building height, measured from natural grade, which means grade prior to change. Sometimes hard to get, but
Yeah.
we asked for a topography map before building. The CR zone has building height measured from finished grade, so like all residential, except that one has 45 feet, but that's here. It's not next to a bunch of residences. Our town center town center code's measured from curb. So all of the buildings through here get measured from the closest street that they front to. And I think the residential professional zone is natural grade. So I've got 2 natural grades, 1 normal standard, 1 curb, and the PO zone, which is unclear really how it's supposed to be measured.
So my only pushback on the residential part of it is most residential homes are 20 feet away from a road. So it's real easy to determine, you know, what that is. I think when it gets spread out, you know, what if the site went like this and we were going off curb here? Is that saying the back building could be 60 feet? You know?
That was the point, is,
Well, so that's where I had kind of put my recommendation, was maybe it's taken off the curb of the parking lot for the building, because they have to have so much for 80 for the handicap wheelchair. They can only have so much from the parking lot to the main door, right? Without going all these ramps and whatever. But and maybe that's something when you look at this, what an architect might have, maybe get an opinion what they've done in other places when there's a big site where it's so far away from like a road, you got all this parking, or you know what I'm saying?
yeah, I follow what you're saying. That's what I was thinking is, if it slopes away, yeah, you could build a 45-foot, but from curb, it's only 35. But if it's the reverse, you could only build a 25, but it would still measure 35. You know, those are extremes.
Yeah.
So somewhere in the middle, but to your point, if they're right next to the road, does that make it a little bit taller? Yeah.
And I was kind of also thinking, you know how you build a building pad? You can just say the lowest point of that building pad from there up, because they're going to try to get that as close to the road because they have to deal with topography. Because you're saying it's that plus the 2 feet from the.
Yeah, we measure, so generally the way we do it is they show us where the highest point of their grade is next to their foundation. And that's where we start measuring from, kind of. We start there and say the bottom of your first floor can't be more than 2 feet above that. So you can only essentially have 2 feet of foundation showing above the highest point of your grade, and then you can go 35 feet from the top of foundation up to roof peak. So that's how we do it for all homes.
But for a commercial, we could just say the lowest point, because they're probably going to mass grade the whole thing anyway.
Well, if it's really sloped, they may not. I don't know. It depends. Because like the ones on the east side of Highland Boulevard were planned to have a basement. They're 1 story, but they have a basement, so they're actually 2 stories, except one is supposed to be below grade. But I don't know how that works with a slope, because those are some pretty steep fall there.
Right.
So I don't know. A lot of ways to do it.
I think that's where we refer back to the city and an expert to address that and give us recommendations.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think coming
all-
from the city rather than a developer recommendation would be. But
So would you like to do a workshop? Would you like to do, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how we're going to proceed. Do we want to meet before?
well, let me ask Rob, if we give you direction on writing the zone and getting the draft, is that a draft you could send out for comment a couple weeks before the meeting instead of right before the meeting?
Yes, I'll just say as a practical matter, with the general plan going on,
Right. That's why I'm asking. your time.
I don't know if I can get it in the next week or so for you to have time to look at it, but I can.
Could we do it for maybe the May meeting? I mean, to have it all done.
Let's see. So the next planning commission meeting is April 22nd. So then I'd have to get it out.
Like, even if you got it a week before the 22nd.
I can do it. I
then we
can
could all
try to get
text
it out a
each
little bit
other,
earlier,
or
maybe towards the beginning of the week before, so it's not just the Thursday before the meeting. Aim for like the 14th or so.
Okay.
well, and I like the idea, I mean, using what's already been prepared as the basis. We already know the direction. It shouldn't be too many major changes or from that. So I think a week ahead or whatever would be good.
If you give me 2 or 3 weeks, I can do that.
Okay, and I just want to clarify, what you're doing is helping us with this particular Patterson PO zone, not with writing code for PO zones.
No, writing code for the whole
Both,
PO zone.
Yeah.
Both, but it's going to be written more in a way that we keep the existing restrictions on building 3.
Or the master site.
Yeah, the master plan that currently exists, and then maybe we'll tweak some of the guidelines so it's a little bit looser, but not much different. And then if they really want something different, they'd have to come in and say, kind of like they did with the flex office building, here's our building elevation, here's the picture of the building we want to build. It doesn't quite match it up, will you let us build this? And then we can go through that public process.
And then that's a public process.
Yes.
Okay.
The other piece that you had mentioned that was kind of troubling is revision control. And if that could be addressed in this as well, of how to control those revisions, because that would help all of us, I think.
Yes, I'm trying to figure out a practical way of making sure that these exhibits don't get lost when, say, I'm not here and other staff members looking at this. They know where to look to find what the current requirements are. So I want to make that clearer.
Can you just record it on the property?
We don't have to look for it. That's the problem.
What is this?
I'm not planning on leaving. Just never know what happens.
So, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jerry.
So an example, what do we call these things when we? Motion. An example motion could be to continue the. An example motion could be to continue this to the next meeting. Rob will have direction to take what we have done already, both in the architecture, but to rewrite the PO code to stand alone as a PO zone, decoupling the master plan and the exhibits, keeping that as a document that will stay in place, and to present that to us like a week prior to meeting to where we can all comment, read it prior to the meeting, so that when we come to the meeting, we can make a decision to move it forward to council.
I wanted to make, go
Wait.
ahead. I wanted to make a couple comments first, and I'll try to be quick. So just to the residents, when I was looking through a lot of this information, it's very clear that a lot of work and time went into this PO zone from not only our staff, but the residents as well as Patterson Construction. And I actually happened to be at the meeting in 2019 for another matter and saw this room filled with residents who were very concerned with the project that was going on at the time with the 2 buildings that are there now. And that was very interesting to me at the time. And I actually, as I was reading through the minutes, I saw that I had commented in that meeting because for that other matter I was working on, I had read through the development code and also the architectural standards for the whole city, and knew that the Planning Commission had more ability to direct what was going to be going on there than maybe they thought they had. And so I had commented about that. But I want you to know that it was, I was actually sitting in the audience at the last meeting when this was passed, where it got rid of our PO zone. Basically, that was not the intent that I heard from the audience. I think there was a misunderstanding there. So I think we're going to try to correct that now. And just want you to know that we are very concerned with how the residents feel about this. This has gone on for a very long time. And I drove through that neighborhood actually this week twice and saw that those homes in that area are so beautiful and so well built, they're timeless. And so to say that it's out of style and things like that, I don't see that. I would also like to say that I prefer that it be at curb, whether that's the road or the parking lot, because I think that's just a little more conducive to the neighbors behind. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Sorry, if you're going to speak, you have to come to the mic, and you have to be to the chair.
I don't know, Tracy, if you're going to talk, but don't take too long. Just please.
So when they first did this, it was the whole thing. It wasn't just building 3. It was also 4 and 6. Am I naming those correctly? So we're asking that they keep that plan in place for all of that they already hashed out a zillion times. And all the neighborhood people that live in Bull River, they haven't moved. They're still there. They're still there. And they care about that. So my proposal would be that everything that has already been okayed stay in place. Now, the stuff that's north of his existing building and the church, that section right there, nothing's in place. There hasn't been any agreement that, so we'll be back to have an input on that. But the stuff that they've already approved, we would like that to stay in place. That doesn't mean they have to do the exact same architectural floor plan that they have the pictures of. If they want to tweak it, I don't think any of us are going to have a heart attack about that. But to keep that residential feel, they all have roofs. They're not flat top. They look like they're part of a resident. And that's bringing it through. And again, I would like you to address the landscaping, which Patterson needs some help.
Thanks, Tracy. I think that's basically what was just said, so thanks for returning. Do you want to make any more comments on that?
I'm ready to make a motion. But I will say one comment to Tracy, because I have talked to attorneys about this, because I noticed that in Highland, things get put in place like easements, things like that, and they're always being rehashed over and over. And I talked to an outside attorney. He just said that's the property owner's right to always ask for a change. They can ask, it doesn't have to be approved, but the property owner has the right to keep bringing it up until somebody doesn't show up. I don't know how it works, but it would be nice that if once it's passed, that's it. But just to clarify, the only buildings that were designated as single level are 1 through 3. Everything on the west side are all 2-story. So, okay. All right, so I'd like to make a motion that we continue this item to our next meeting with the direction for, did I just say Rob? What do we? Staff, thank you. Staff to look at the PO zone to uncouple the existing master plan, which would include their exhibits, landscape, everything, to stand alone and to remain in place unless they come in to submit to make changes to that. And then to have staff look at the PO zone with the comments that we've already given and some of the architectural suggestions that were given, and write a draft of what that PO zone would look like as a standalone for future PO zones, and to get that to us a week prior to the meeting as a draft that we can be able to read and go through, make some more tweaks prior to the meeting so that we can make a decision or a recommendation to council next meeting. And I think this will also give the developer an opportunity to just see, right, they can look at this.
So we have a motion. I would like to clarify and have it read back to us so we all hear what was said as you understand it or as was recorded, please. If that's possible to summarize.
Do you have it, Heather? I have some scribbles. What I have is make a motion to continue to the next meeting with the direction to look at the PO zone to uncouple the existing master plan, but ensure that it remains in place so that changes to it must be processed as a legislative matter, and for staff to look at the PO zone text as a whole to make suggestions based on what has been comments from the public, comments from Planning Commission, and even some from, I think, the developer's text amendment, and make a recommendation from staff as to how to make the PO zone applicable more broadly.
Could we specify stays in place for this development?
Yes, that was part of it. The master plan, we're taking it out of the zone, but we'll keep it
Existing
in
master
there.
plan.
The existing one will stay in place. That was not a shorter way of saying the motion.
You did great. There was all, yeah. So I understood that. Anybody on the commission have any questions?
And I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Let's vote. Jerry?
Yes.
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 Yes. So motion passes.
Thank
you
you.
all for coming, and please come again. We do like input.
It's nice not to just be alone.
All right, the next action, communication items. And Jay, are you addressing this, or do you want me to just read it?
I was just going to ask the April 8th transportation, that's when we're meeting with the mayor. And is that when we're meeting with the mayor and we're driving these actual sites? No?
No, you need to do that before then. 8th is the meeting.
So when did we say that we were doing that with the mayor? It's the first?
Doug might know.
We are checking out trails and different things that we had questions about so that we had input on different areas of the city when we addressed the master plan. And he was going to get a UDOT van or something like
Yeah.
that. And we would go and investigate these places.
Break up into groups.
And we would do it earlier in the evening, like, I think we said 5 or something.
Is that a meeting? So what's the topic
It was
this,
field trip.
this time? Transportation? Did I see that on there?
So Jay,
I
I'm
sent
sorry,
out
I'm
a
reading.
document.
Oh, there it is.
I sent out a document earlier this evening
Okay.
giving some guidance on that, areas that you may want to look at. So if you take a look at that, that should probably help you in your planning on where you go. To point A, if I could start at the beginning, the Planning Commission policies and handbook. Rob and I have developed a handbook for your use that will help you. It's mainly for, I would say, new members on the Planning Commission. There can be kind of a learning curve, especially when it comes to understanding, okay, what is in your legislative purview and what is an administrative decision and things like that. This is trying to help shorten or flatten that learning curve so that new members, alternate members who maybe aren't, actively participating as often are able to step in when they need to and be effective Planning Commission members from the get-go. So we're still just doing some last little bit of refining. We'll probably share that with you next month, but just wanted to let you know about that. It also talks about ethics training as well. Goes over your training requirements that state statute requires of planning commissioners. So hopefully it's useful for you.
Is there an audio book portion of this?
I'm sorry, what?
Is there an
Audio
audio version of this? We can listen to.
Only if you read it to yourself.
Yeah, Jay will read it to
Out
you
loud.
if you want to come to his office. All right, thanks. Appreciate that. So yeah, did anybody have any other questions, or did we get an answer on that?
The mayor
bus
wanted
tour?
me to let you know, he texted me, it's April 1st was the planned tour time, April Fool's Day. So staff is not organizing that, so reach out to the mayor, to each other, figure out how to coordinate that.
It's a Tuesday.
It is a Tuesday, it's during spring break. And if you can't make it then just, as Jay said, you got a little handout in your email that was highlighting some things to go look at. Just go drive those areas and go look at them before the 8th.
All right. And then future meetings, we already talked April 8th, April 15th. And our next meeting is the 22nd of April. Anybody have any last minute comments or questions or concerns? Any motions anyone wants to make to end the meeting?
I move that we close the meeting.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, thank you. Meeting adjourned. I learned last time you can't say aye. That has something else to do. You should say yes.